Hi, everybody. Back again with another edition of Chamber TV. I'm Laurie White, president of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and this is episode number 144. A very special episode. We are live on Facebook, we are live on Twitter, and we are live on LinkedIn. So our guest today is the president and CEO of Rhode Island's preeminent workers' comp insurance company, Brian Spero, from the Beacon Mutual Insurance.
Thanks a lot, Laurie.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome to Chamber TV. I know that you and I have had a long history of working together. I don't know how many years, maybe 25 years together, working out all kinds of issues.
Since you were 12.
Yes. But it's great to have you on the program and to be able to catch up with you. You are among Rhode Island's most important employers because you provide a very necessary and existential service and product in workers' compensation. So keeping our employees and our employers safe and protected. And I'm sure you've had a lot on your plate during this COVID-19 time. So let's just take a couple of minutes, get our viewers sort of level set to what the Beacon Mutual Insurance Company is all about, and we'll take it from there. So just give us a little primer, Brian, on the company.
So actually, Beacon was formed back in the early 1990s as a result of a real crisis in the workers' compensation availability. Mostly everybody in Rhode Island was in the pool. Rates were set to double for a second year in a row. The General Assembly, in a very unique partnership, something you don't see much of with the Chamber and the General Assembly and the Governor's Office and the Attorney General, everybody got together and decided that we needed a state fund. And so Beacon was formed as a state chartered insurance company. I think one thing that people don't understand is we are actually an independent mutual insurance company, although we were started by the state. We're not a state agency. We're not a quasi-state agency. You know, Rhode Island is a very now competitive workers' compensation market. But back in 1992, when we wrote our first policy, there were essentially no other carriers available in the state to write policies. The only other carrier was actually sued by the state of Rhode Island to stay in the carrier. Everybody else had left the state. And I think that's one of the key points to our existence and our success over the last almost 30 years is that we're here. You know, we are a Rhode Island institution. We don't plan to go anywhere. We can't go anywhere. We employ 170 Rhode Islanders that live here in the state, and other companies can come in and out of the state when their market appetite changes. But for us, we're here to serve our policyholders. Now, you know, basically, we're an independent mutual insurance company owned by our policyholders. The one difference is that we are also the residual market. So anybody that needs insurance, no matter, you know, what they do or how risky the business is or how bad their experience is, we have to write them. And we honestly, we embrace that role as the residual market.
Sure. So that was a great overview. And what some folks may not know is that in Rhode Island, like many other places, probably all across the country, without exception, I'm guessing, workers' compensation is a must in order to be in business. And if you have more than just you as a self-employed individual and perhaps one other individual, workers' compensation is something that you must carry. You can't be in business without it. So tell us a little bit about what you have seen in the market over the last, 15, 18 months or so. You have a unique vantage point on what's happening in business, what's happening in industry, what's happening with the workforce based on the data that you have as the workers' compensation insurer.
So it has been certainly an interesting couple of years for every business in the state, including Beacon. Back in March of 2020, like many other companies, we decided to go remote. We were fortunate in that we are all about planning, and virtually all of our employees were working from laptops, not desktops. So it was easy for us through our disaster recovery plan to just say, okay, in 2 days, you're going to be working from home. And although it was, a little bumpy for people to use technology that was out there, but they had never used before, but we didn't really miss a beat. Uh, you know, because we are Rhode Islanders and so close to the community, uh, we did a number of things that we thought were really important to our policyholders. Number one, our claims number just closely tracked the COVID numbers, and we insure a lot of the healthcare facilities in the state, um, the privately owned ones. And so, those frontline healthcare workers were the ones that were really at risk. And unlike any other insurance company that writes within the state, and unlike pretty much any of the self-insureds, we decided to adopt a presumption that if you were a healthcare worker and you had COVID, we weren't going to contest the claim unless we had proof that it wasn't caused by what you were doing for an injury. And we got a lot of positive press for that. So that was really important for us in our view of taking care of our healthcare workers, that we insure their employers, and it worked. It worked well. Also, we really saw a pretty significant drop in premium because our premium is based on payroll, and there were a lot of people that were not working. But at the same time, we knew the businesses of Rhode Island were struggling. And, despite the pandemic, we had a couple of good years financially, and we gave back 8% in 2020 and 10% paid in 2021 to our policyholders. And that was really an effort to get money back into the business community at a time when they really needed it. And you could particularly see that in the whole entertainment industry. And we do write a lot of the restaurants and entertainment industry in the state. That's a real specialty of ours. And so a lot of those policyholders were really, really hurting. So what have we seen? Luckily, we've seen business come back, honestly, a lot faster than some of us expected. A lot of our businesses had a really strong, in the entertainment industry, really strong summers. We can see that in the payroll numbers, which we track for pretty much every policy holder. And so that's really great. When you look around the state, you see how well everybody's done, and you look at our unemployment numbers. We've actually recovered probably faster than a lot of the other New England states. Our economy may not be quite as strong as some of those other states, but in terms of recovering for our employers within the state, I think it's been a pretty good story over the last, certainly the last 6 or 8 months.
You mentioned the recovery story and things coming back fairly strongly, but I have to ask you about the elephant in the room from an employer perspective is the inability to get workers, and that is stratified across all segments. It's not simply in the hospitality industry or in the um, entry wage positions. It's really something all across the board. It's been dubbed the Great Resignation. What are your observations on that, Brian?
Well, I could give you my general observations for the state, and I can give you our personal observations for Beacon. Across the state, there does appear to be a real mismatch between, there still are people that are unemployed, but employers are having trouble still filling positions. Part of that is a wage issue. There are employers that are out there that are paying more for hourly employees because they need them with, in the large retail businesses are paying significantly more on an hourly rate than they would have been 3 years ago. And that's putting pressure on smaller businesses that need hourly employees. Again, service industry, restaurant industry, tough to get employees to work in those industries when they can, go to some retail operation and make, as much money. And I will tell you from, Beacon's perspective, we have a great culture here. We don't see a lot of people leave the company, but with the remote work advent and plus the flexibility of people to work wherever they want around the country, it's putting pressure on us too. It is a very, very competitive job market. 90% of the employees in our company are professionals, and it's we want to make sure that we're keeping them happy so that when that call comes from the headhunter, they're not picking up the phone and answering it. So there is, both on a statewide basis, it is very difficult for people to hire people, and I do think some of that's wage based. But even for, in the service industry, professional industry, it's just a very hot job market, something we haven't seen in a long, long time.
How does that play out from an insurance perspective? When you have fewer workers, you have less expensive payroll, and then as a result, payroll is tied to workers' compensation premiums. So is there any destabilization in the market that you are worried about with fewer workers paying into the comp system?
No, not really. I mean, we're a Rhode Island company. We insure Rhode Island companies. Earlier today, I was having a conversation with our marketing communications director because next year will be our 30th anniversary. And, we've had policyholders of our company for 20 and 30 years. We have an extraordinarily high retention rate for an insurance company in the mid 90s. So we know who we're insuring, and we know our policyholders pretty well. And we do audit them. So I think, by and large, we're pretty good at capturing the payroll as it goes up and down. I think people are having to pay a little bit more now, which increases their payroll, and the premium is based on your payroll, so it does increase the premium as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's an interesting point as the wage base and wage rates and the ceiling on wages continues to escalate for any one of a number of reasons, then the cost of payroll tied to insurance premium, it does cost employers more to hire people and to retain people as
Sure.
part of the overall HR package, right?
Right, but part of that too is, in the trades and things like that, they may be hiring people that are not as experienced as their long-term employee, and so they're paying them more money, hiring less experienced people. And so when those people get hurt, the losses are higher because we're paying, for workers' compensation, you pay an indemnity, which is basically a percentage of their wages, and you pay all of their medical expenses. And so as people are making more, that means their indemnity payment is more too. So it's not like you're just paying more premium that goes in the insurance company's pocket. It's as, our loss ratio probably is not going to change very much based on hopefully based on increased payroll, but the actual payments that we're making are going to be higher as well. So
You
it is so
mentioned, you mentioned claims, you mentioned the loss ratio. Of course, we've had, the majority of workers working from home. So that's a little bit of a different dynamic.
Mhm.
How is it that employers and you as the workers' comp provider, insurance provider, how did you deal with, maintaining a safe residence for people working? Talk us through some
Now,
of those issues. Those are complicated, right?
those are complicated. We have uh, 13 people in our loss prevention department here in Warwick. A national carrier who we might compete with, they have 4 or 5 for all of them. And those services are absolutely free to our policyholders. So, we do ergonomic assessments. We do them for our own employees. We do them for our policyholders, employers. But, the question you raise is a pretty good one. So there were a lot of people working from home. And during that time frame, not as many people were getting hurt at work, and you're not as likely to get hurt from home. So, our losses were less, which is honestly why we were able to give back 18% over 2 years to our policyholders, because we weren't paying it out in claims, and we are a policyholder-owned institution, and it was the right thing to do for our policyholders. So that money went back into policyholders' pockets. Now, when we think about Laurie, like you and I, probably working remotely all of that time, but there were a lot of businesses out there that were still, doing their regular jobs, whether you were working in a grocery store or, the construction trades. Governor Raimondo never shut down the construction trade, so all of that construction industry was still going on. The transportation industry, trucking, busing, all of those industries were still working on, all fours, if not even, working a little bit harder. So it was, companies like mine, we had the luxury of being able to send people home. If you work, at Dave's Marketplace, you didn't have the luxury of sending your people home. They were in the the business in the building, and hopefully not, getting infected from COVID, but certainly continuing to work.
And the employers certainly, went above and beyond to make sure that their essential frontline workers were protected, that they had the right
Mhm.
equipment, that they had the right PPE, all kinds of, situations that employers had to deal with that were very complex, unusual, unprecedented. But I think it's fair to say that we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to those workers who, in fact, did have to venture beyond the dining room table, if you will, to go out into the workforce, to go out into the field, to be customer centric, customer facing, patient facing, and all of
Mhm.
those, all of that complexity, no doubt, probably changed your algorithms, if you will, in
Mhm.
terms of predicting your loss ratio and predicting what's going to happen with your book of business, right?
Right. And, just on a personal note, I think, there's the physical risk, which we insure, somebody actually getting sick from being a frontline worker. But you can't understate the, uh, the mental toll that it took on people. I mean, I just can't imagine, being a nurse or an emergency room doctor in one of our insured hospitals through this time period. And not only the physical difficulty and the strain of working long hours under very difficult conditions, but also the mental strain for that. It was extraordinary, and that's, it's good to hopefully, we're coming out of this, or at least hit a pretty steady state where people can recover a little bit from that.
Mhm. So where does a traditional health insurance, medical insurance package versus your workers' compensation premium? Where is the dividing line or the bifurcation, if you will, between on mental health claims? You brought up stress and
Mhm,
emotional wellness and post traumatic stress disorder, all kinds of things that truly can impact a worker's ability to be
mhm.
fluent on the job. Which policy responds in that case?
Well, actually, that's a really good question, and it also goes right back to one of the things we talked about early on, which was, do you need workers' compensation insurance? And anybody that's got one employee, you need to have a workers' compensation coverage. And honestly, even even if you have the ability under Rhode Island law to accept yourself as an owner of a company from coverage. But one thing that it's important to note is your health insurance coverage doesn't cover you if you're hurt on the job. Anybody that walks into a doctor's office or emergency room, one of the first questions they ask is, were you hurt on the job or not? And you know, that sort of dictates where the coverage is. And, that may be easy for somebody that slips and falls and gets hurt at work. Okay, so the workers' comp coverage applies to that, and, their health insurance coverage doesn't. It's a little bit more, obviously, gray. It's not so black and white when you're talking about stress disorders and things like that. Luckily, we haven't seen very much of that at all. But it's certainly something that we can, see as a possibility. And then, it's really a question of, is it factually related to to what they were doing for a job, for, uh, an emergency room physician or something. That might be an easy one. Or is it more related to, other outside factors that are going on
Mhm.
in their life? And many, many people, even though they might not have been at, physical risk in their jobs, there certainly was, and still is, a lot of stress on workers all throughout the state. I mean, parents, single mothers, with multiple kids at home in remote learning situations while they're trying to do their job
Mhm.
remotely. I mean, there was all sorts of stress over this period of time, and you know, I think luckily probably not as much recently, but we are moving into the winter.
What I grew to appreciate was in my office, the ergonomics are much more advantageous than they were at my home. And, it's just something that I basically took for granted, like proper posture,
Uh-huh.
proper hands on your keyboard, proper,
Mhm.
seating with your legs at 90-degree angles, your knees at 90-degree angles. All the things that sort of, that are part and parcel of the general corporate environment that you don't necessarily notice when you take that away and you move to the proverbial dining room table, if you
Right,
will.
right,
Um,
and
you know,
yeah,
I
or for people that don't have the luxury of a separate little office in their house or a table to work at, or if they're sitting in bed working. I mean, it can be horrible in terms of ergonomics. And we have a lot of information out on our website. Again, this is something that we do for our policyholders. We do it for ourselves too, as we re-enter the building. Uh, we did some paint and paper while we were gone, but everybody had to clean out their offices. So now people are getting back, and we're going through the entire building with our ergonomists to make sure everybody's chairs and keyboards and uh, screen heights are all proper, so we don't get
Mhm.
people you know people don't get hurt.
Yeah. I remember that was a real thing for me. Like, maybe
Yeah.
4 or 5 months into it, I noticed that both of my arms were killing me, like, well, it was like radiating all the way up to my shoulder. And
Oh yeah.
what the heck is going on here? And then I, figured it out that perhaps, my mouse was at the wrong angle or my hands were at the wrong angle. And, you're busy on your laptop, but you don't really pay much attention to,
Right.
the
Any other?
degree to which yeah. So your position is that if don't take ergonomics for granted. It's really something that can create and set off a series of chronic illnesses. But you can go to your website. Is that what you're saying? And you have
Sure. Yeah.
fair
Or
amount.
we've got a ton of material on our website under our loss prevention department. And if you're a Beacon policyholder, pick up the phone and call us. We'll make sure your employees are taken care of. That's what we do.
Did you make house calls?
We do.
You
Yeah.
do?
Oh yeah. Sure. Our ergonomists and our loss prevention people. I mean, where you work is where you work.
Really?
We hold training for third shift people, second shift people. We go to one of the beauties of being in Warwick is, we can be anywhere in Rhode Island in about 30 minutes from where I'm sitting. And so, yeah, that's what we do. That's the advantage of having somebody local, right? Your workers' comp.
So I could have had Beacon Mutual make a house call to
As a valued policyholder, Laurie, you could have called us and we would have had somebody down at your house and taking a look at it. Yeah.
make sure I wasn't going to trip over the vacuum cord or anything like that. Well, it feels so great to be back in the office with the full array of conveniences as we know them.
Yeah, no, it does. And just interestingly for me, I would never have imagined a world where I would have liked to work remotely and just generally like to be around people. Um, but over the time that we were completely remote, I actually learned to enjoy it. And now that we are sort of, working our way back into the building, we're going to be very flexible with our employees by letting them work 2 to 3 days at home, be a little more flexible with their hours, things like that. And, that actually works for me too. Although I'm in the office today and we've probably got about, we're all having people come in only on a voluntary basis right now. We've probably got about 20% of our employees in today. Great to see everybody. But, yesterday I worked from home and I kind of enjoyed that. Saved myself the 50-minute drive from Portsmouth to Warwick.
Well, we're very grateful that you're reducing your carbon footprint, Brian. So that's very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so what are you seeing in a larger view? A lot of employers are really struggling with this notion of like, what do I do with my workforce? You have the camps where, they say, okay, well, if you're doing, data crunching or solitary tasks that you don't necessarily, need a team of people to be creative, then, that's fine. You can, we can be flexible. But what about others that that are especially younger employees that need to be mentored, if you will, that need to learn, corporate culture, need to have random collisions in the corridor, if you will, to get opportunities for growth. But all of this, it becomes again another difficult paradigm for employers to try to, pick their way through. Being flexible, but also understanding at the same time that this is a business, and we are here to serve our customers, to serve our shareholders, to serve one another, if you will, our employee base. What are you seeing employers in your book of business doing to respond to again these difficult choices that they have to make?
Right. And it really runs the gamut. For us, culture is hugely important to us as an organization. It's the reason that I came here initially. Just a great place to work. Got a lot of tenured employees who really know their jobs. And when you look at our own employees, there's probably 20 or 30% that want to be back in the building more. There's a lot in the middle that really sort of appreciate the flexibility that we're giving. And then there's probably a good 10 or 15% that just assume work completely from home. And we struggle with the same issues. It's very important for us to have an office presence because that's what we're selling. I mean, the workers' comp policy is a workers' comp policy, pretty much no matter where you buy it. The terms really aren't that much different. So what are you getting? If you buy it from us, you're getting, your claims adjuster is here in the office. You can come and see them. Your underwriter is here. Our loss prevention people are here or out on the road. So it is important for us to maintain a presence in the building. But at the same time, we want to be flexible enough to make sure that our employees are satisfied. Industry-wide, again, when you look at service industries, I think they have the luxury, whether it's you're in a call center or you're working for a large bank or insurance company, you have the luxury of having a remote workforce to some extent, and you have to take a look at it and see which jobs work better remotely. I think, like you mentioned, some of our programmers and information technology people, they're fine working from home. But we have our own staff law office. The workers' comp court is open, and so those lawyers have to be in court every day. Now, they may not come into the office every day, but they're probably stopping by on their way from remote work. So it also very much dependent on your job. But when you look at and I actually did a little study. I looked at those types of jobs where you have the luxury. They're probably only about a third of the jobs in the entire state. If you're working in retail or construction or healthcare, you don't have that luxury. You got to go into work. I mean, it's until building-based business, you don't have that remote work. But for professional firms and even those that may in the past have seemed like a lot more conservative, as you know, I came from a law firm environment, before I came to Beacon 13 years ago. And, law firms are pretty traditional, but I even see a lot of my former partners and other law firms around the state being a lot more flexible with their people and saying, oh, you know what, maybe we are going to let you work from home a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there is sort of that, the age factor too. If you're young and single and don't have children and want to come in and, that social aspect of the work environment is important to them, then, those people are happy to come in. For some of us at the other end of the spectrum, we're happy to be here because we don't need to be home necessarily. But about 45% of our employees have school-age children, and so it's tough for them. And the remote work, works a lot better for them. So that's what we're trying to do, provide them with the flexibility. And I think a lot of employers similarly situated from us are doing the exact same thing. All of the HR, vice presidents of all the big companies, they have a little working group and they're always sharing information. So we find out what everybody else is doing. We'd like to think we're on the right side.
Well, what is everybody else doing? I can tell you I'm here in downtown Providence. It's still very quiet here. Many of the major employers are saying January. What are you seeing?
I think that's generally what people are saying. But Laurie, you and I had this conversation before. I think the days of seeing, I drove into Providence last week for a meeting at like 11:30 and the streets were quiet. And I think even after January, when people start coming back in the office, you know, the most of the companies downtown, I think, you know, they're probably going to have 50 or 60% of their people in the building at any one time because of giving people flexibility and remote work options. And so it's never going to be as vibrant during the day as it was in the past. Those days are just, I think they're gone. But I think most people are doing what we did. We were originally looking at September, but we weren't comfortable with the numbers in September. Instead, what we said is, you know, start coming in voluntarily. We have rules around it, you know, to protect people that are here. We've gotten pretty good, a lot of people that want to do that. And we're looking for the beginning of January to hopefully have you know, a little more presence in the building. And I think that's pretty much what a lot of people are doing. And there are outliers that are, you know, I've heard of a large Rhode Island employer that's basically said, hey, 2022. Stay at home.
22. Huh.
Yep.
Well, I'm wondering, you know, just looking out, you know, this is still for many people still a novelty, if you will. You know, the idea that, you know, you're gonna, you know, really grind it out at home and have the flexibility. But, you know, long term, like 5 years from now, when the newness wears off, when you know, things are fully open, where hopefully COVID-19 will be in the rearview mirror. Do you really think that this is a trend that has staying power?
Yes.
You do.
I think the world has changed and we're not going back. I really do. I think I just I just don't see people changing back to where it's come from. And a lot of the things that I read, you know, studies by Deloitte and PwC, and you know, everybody that's looking at these things, you know, to retain your best employees, you know, for the time being and for the foreseeable future, you know, that the leverage between the employer and the employees, the professional services businesses has changed dramatically.
But that could change back, though.
It
You know,
could.
the pendulum swings both ways, right? And
Mhm.
at one point, and it's an employer market, and and then just wait a little while, and it flips to an employee in the driver's seat, and it goes back and forth. So is this something? I totally agree that there are a lot of efficiencies on Zoom for meetings and things that are routine, administrative in nature that might have involved getting in a car, traveling, doing something that was non-value added. All of
Mhm.
that gone virtual. I think it's a great thing. That is not going back. Totally with you on that. But relative to like the bulk of the work, the bulk of being part of a company, an enterprise, a larger company, mid-size, small, all across, the camaraderie and the feeling of, okay, well, we're going to learn from each other, and we're going to, we are going to be, um, a company that we're going to be in person, and that we're going to work together, and we're going to collectively attack this. You don't see that coming back at all?
Well, again, it's going to depend very much on the company um, and the type of company. I will go back to something you said earlier. Although it is efficient to, have Zoom calls, there's a huge amount of Zoom fatigue too. I mean, there are days like my day yesterday where I had a half an hour off. Otherwise, every single block on the hour, you know, uh, or on the half hour, I had another Zoom meeting, and
Mhm.
there's no time to sort of get up from your desk, and that's a very very fatiguing existence. And also
Not
the
healthy. Not
no, it's not healthy. It's not healthy at all. And the other thing that you're missing, that there's a lack of efficiency in that because you are missing that bumping into the hall um, and talking to people, as opposed to having to set up, find the right time, get everybody together on a Zoom call, and no one else has conflicts, which can be a scheduling nightmare. Whereas A couple of weeks ago, I was here sitting in my office, and some of my senior managers were having a little strategic discussion, a conference room, a couple of conference room down, and rather than having to set up a meeting with them, it was great for them to just come over and sit down in my office and say, "What do you think about this?" And we probably saved a half hour of planning time finding a meeting, and a lot of other time by just sitting down and talking it through. And plus, you can get there is a real advantages to talking face to face with people. You can get a better idea of what's going on. The side conversations can add a lot of value to what you're talking about. But I do think, it has switched. So pretty much, I think the expectation going forward is people are going to have more flexibility in their work arrangements and their work-life balance. We're at the infancy of this whole thing too, Laurie. So not only are companies trying to figure it out, but people are trying to figure it out what works for them as well. And again, you're right. 5 years from now, there may be a lot of people that say it works best for me to be in the office.
Right. At least you can shut down.
Yep. Yeah, well, that's the other issue too. We get that a lot from our employees, that they don't. There's not that break. On the one hand, I was born and raised in Portsmouth, still live there. Not really what I intended, but like many Rhode Islanders, that's how it worked out. For years, drove to Providence, and now for 13 years, I've been driving to work every day. Although people on Aquidneck Island say, "Oh my God, you drive the whole way to Providence or to Warwick." That to me gave you that break in the day. It was okay. You left the office, and then whatever, you just listened to sports radio or talk shows or whatever on the way home. By the time you got home, you were sort of decompressed from the office, and you might log back on. But now that whole blurring between when your day is over and we're struggling with that. I think our employees are struggling with that. We do see that as a stressor.
Mm. Well, I kind of see it as like decision fatigue. Like, okay, well, I'm going to, be flexible from like 11 to 1:30. I have something personal to do, so I'll set aside, make up those hours later. Or, well, wait a minute, should I do it now, or should I go at 7:30, or should I do something at 12:30, or should I
Then you don't do it.
Right?
Then you don't get up and leave. That's the problem. Whereas, if you're in your office and you say, okay, it's 12:30, things have quieted down. I'm going to get up and I'm, going wherever I need to go to, the grocery store or the home box or, the Best Buy or Lowe's or whatever. You have the time to do that. But if you're just sitting at your desk at home, working, it's sort of tougher to make that transition just to get up and say, all right, I'm taking an hour.
But then you feel guilty, like, oh, I really shouldn't be doing this. I really shouldn't be taking the dry cleaning out.
That's where having an understanding employer makes a big difference.
Yeah, everything blurs. So in the few minutes we have left, Brian, let's just kind of look out into the future, way out into the future. So way out, like 5 years. What when you go doing your very important professional development work with your industry peers in workers' compensation, what are some of the interesting things that people are talking about relative to insuring people? Are you talking about robots, taking over, things that we traditionally wouldn't think could ever be automated? Like we know about, certain processes that can be automated. But what are you seeing out there? What are people talking about that's really that could be interesting?
So from our policyholder perspective and industry, I do think the technological change in terms of manufacturing and transportation is coming. It seems to be coming a little bit slower than some people think. And so there's, I think remote cars, driving trucks, those things are coming at some point. How much they affect the Rhode Island economy, I'm not really sure. Um, there are actually, programs out there, artificial intelligence that do underwriting and things like that. But that's not something that we see immediately on the horizon. One thing that we do see um, as something that we're going to be concentrating on a lot more, we actually already are things like predictive analytics and the use of data both from within inside our company and outside our company to predict all sorts of things and to make sure that we get the pricing right on our policies and to make sure that we can more accurately predict losses going forward, that we can predict what's going to happen in the economy much better based on the information that we have. I mean, we've got 30 years of Rhode Island payroll information in our companies. We're obviously, using that to, to our advantage. So there's so much going on in that in the technological areas of predictive analytics and artificial intelligence, and in the insurance banking industries, things like that. You're going to see a lot of that.
One job that I never would have guessed could be automated through artificial intelligence is sports reporting. So either for television, radio, newspaper, the idea of attending a game as a reporter, watching the
Yeah.
plays, who wins, who loses. But I sat through a lecture a couple of months ago where a very prominent media company, sports media company, was talking about how algorithms now are being used to gather and write news stories without any human intervention, based on the size of the crowd and based on you know certain movements on a screen, and based on a bunch of other predictive analytics. They are actually able to tell how many people are in the stands, what the score is, if it's close, who's making some of the best plays, what happened, and then the stories actually write themselves, and they're disseminated and they're updated on a timely basis. So these are some of the
Look at stock market investing.
yeah.
The bulk of the investments are run by algorithms now. It's scary stuff. That's the way it is. We actually, you were talking about sports. We have a data scientist on our staff who's a great young kid who worked in the tennis industry before he came here, and he was hired by tennis stars because he had an analytical program that could predict what their opponents were going to do. Where they were going to serve the ball, when, just based on, years and years of data collected about that particular player that they were opposing, you could predict what they're going to do
Mm-hmm.
with a high degree of accuracy, like up to 80%.
Well, the more longitudinal data you can collect, the more it becomes very predictive, because the neurons, right, the neural paths in the artificial intelligence, they just they just adjust and they adjust and they adjust and they titrate, and next thing you know, you have a tennis predictive
Yeah.
analytics business on your hands. So that sounds pretty interesting. So what happened to that?
Well, now he's writing predictive analytic programs
For
for
you?
us on things like premium and losses and
That doesn't sound
things like
nearly as
that.
fun.
He finally saw the light and saw how exciting an opportunity the insurance industry is, and so
Well,
he's with us.
just saying, I don't know if that's as exciting, but hey, what do I know? In any event, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I do want to give you a chance to, just make a pitch as to, what Beacon is doing these days for their clients, for their employer clients, and how any of our members that might be watching, what could they do, or what should they do, or what must
Mhm.
they do to take better advantage of the great service that you offer.
Yeah, and that's really it, Lori. I mean, again, we're here in Warwick. We're Rhode Islanders. We're part of the Rhode Island community. We do write out of state, but the uh, predominance of our business is within the state. There are a lot of advantages, to using somebody that knows the system here in Rhode Island. We've got a staff of 5 in-house lawyers that handle claims for our policyholders. I think they're the best defense lawyers in the state for workers' comp. We've got 30 plus adjusters who are all here. So if one of your, we have a really caring environment for injured workers. I mean, when you get on there and listen to these people, to our adjusters talk on the phone to injured workers, you can tell that they really care about people. And it's all in an effort to get that person back to work, because as long as that person's out, it's not, it's a cost to the business. Or if they can't get back to work, to make sure they're properly taken care of, both from a medical and indemnity perspective. So again, like I said, the workers' comp policy you can get anywhere. The real differentiator for Beacon is our culture internally and our culture externally, and the services that we can provide to our policyholders, whether they be premium auto loss prevention, claims underwriting, and like I always say, if you have a problem with a national carrier, you can't pick up the phone and call the president of that national carrier. If a policyholder has a problem with Beacon Mutual, I'm sitting here in my office at one, right off 95, and they can pick up the phone and call me, and they're going to get a call back, and we're going to make sure that the issue is addressed one way or the other. So again, I've been here 13 years. I truly believe in the company. I think all of our employees truly believe in the mission of the company. It's just, it's a great place to work, and I think that you can really see that through this, through the attitude of our employees to the service they give. So I guess that would be my pitch.
Plus, you make house calls.
Plus we'll make a house call. Yeah.
Brian Spero, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Beacon Mutual Insurance Company in Warwick. It was great to catch up with you today to talk about all kinds of things, futuristic and sentimental and everything in between, and just really get a snapshot of what you're seeing in the employer community and the resilience of the economy. We really appreciate your leadership. You are a member of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and you bring a great perspective from the industry to our deliberations. And it's important that we continue to keep the dialogue open so that workers' compensation insurance in Rhode Island can continue to be competitively priced, and Rhode Island employers are able to, compete for employees and also to be able to stay in business because the system is well managed. And that's what we're seeing today. Many years ago, we quote unquote marched on the State House because our compensation system was in shambles, but that is not the case today. Today, we have very well respected leader in the market in Beacon Mutual, and we have a lot of trust and faith and confidence that you will always do the right thing for both the policyholder and the injured worker. So thank you for being with us today. We will see you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Laura. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
You too.